We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello and Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Christmas movie month, and this week we are talking the 1992 film Home Alone 2. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my sticky co-host, Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
I'm a little worried about the implication of your sticky co-host, but yes.
Listen, if we were covering the first movie, you'd be my wet co-host, so I think you got the better end of that deal.
Better is a... There's never been a greater instance where better is a relative term.
Andrew, I am so excited for this month. I mean, I'm excited for every month we do. I love what we do. I love jumping into these movies, but man, Christmas... I love this season. I love these movies. And yeah, of course, we're diving into the poorly received holiday movies, the lesser ones, you know, but there's it sounds dumb, but there's that Christmas magic in almost all of these. And I'm always finding something that I love. So it might not be our most challenging month, but regardless, a lot of the movies we're going to be talking about genuinely don't come up as people's favorite of the season, or they are only talked about in relationship to the better ones of the holiday movies, and maybe they just haven't gotten their due yet. So I'm excited to jump in the movies we're covering this month and just wring out all the positives that we can. How about you?
Exactly the same. I love the season. I love Christmas. I mean, I always see people lament that Christmas is encroaching more and more on Halloween every year, and it doesn't bother me, but it's never bothered me. I like Christmas. I like the season. I love the movies. I love everything about it. I love being in a place where we kind of get snow and it feels like more Christmas. I love that aspect of it. There's a big, they do a big Christmas market in the city every year. I love going there. So I'm excited to look at these movies. Like you said, not the first string, as it might be called. Not the ones that anybody's, we're not doing the Grinch. We're not doing the first Home Alone. We're doing the ones that
we are doing the Grinch, actually.
We're doing a Grinch, not the Grinch.
Okay, right, of course.
But
not the Grinch.
Just like we're doing a Home Alone, not the Home Alone.
Fair.
Well, that's not... That status on Jingle All the Way might get a little questioned by me. I know a lot of people that love that movie. But either way, I mean, you get the idea, folks. We're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about these movies that are kind of maybe a step down below the classics. But I have a lot of love for a lot of these movies. So, like you said, not going to be our most challenging month, but I'm excited to give these things a second look.
I love Christmas, and I had my outside decorations up, lights and everything, probably about a week before Thanksgiving. I would have put them out. Well, exactly. I would have put them out November 1st. Like, I don't care. But I did have, like, my older brother was like, oh, the disrespect to Thanksgiving. It's like, well, what am I going to do? Put an inflatable turkey in the yard? Like, you don't decorate for Thanksgiving.
No.
Who cares? Let's jump into it's the holiday season. It's all encompassing. Christmas is where it's at. I think I've been on record saying I don't really care about Thanksgiving, but I don't think I'm disrespecting Thanksgiving. I'm just excited to get into the season.
My jack-o'-lanterns into the yard to compost. And I don't know if there's a greater harvest gift that I could give my plants than that. So there, I decorated for Thanksgiving by throwing my rotted pumpkins into the yard. You're welcome.
I'm sure those plants are very thankful. But, I put a lot of work into our yard. And more every year, it seems like. And, I don't want them up for 25 days, for a month. I want to get the most I can out of it. So, am I the first one decorating on the block? Yeah, but I am proud of that, damn it. But let's jump into this movie that we have here. I would ask you, like, what's your history with the Home Alone movies? But, like, you're a millennial like me. You grew up watching them, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, I
Macaulay
mean,
Culkin movies. They were on rotation
this
our whole
was
life.
this is on TV. It's been on. Basically, I'm 5 years old when this comes out, so I don't think I see this in theaters, just because my sister is about 7, about to turn 8. No, my sister's probably 8 when this comes out. My brother is like 3. So I don't think my parents were really taking us to the movies when we were those ages, and that wasn't really as big of a thing that happened very often. So, but you couldn't escape this movie. And oddly, I remember more of this movie than the first one. I guess because like the hype from the first one carried over. But like, I had a Talkboy. I know I did. It probably is still at my parents' house. I should see if it still works.
You should see what's on that tape.
That's the scary part. But either way, like, this was everywhere, and it's been everywhere. It has never not been a part of it's. I am 35, and this has been a part of my life for 30 years of it, which is insane to think about. But
I really thought you were going to launch into a Dr. Manhattan thing when you started this. Like, I'm 5 years old. I'm watching Home Alone 2 for the first time. I'm 35 years old. I'm talking to a microphone about Home Alone 2.
For the first time. I mean, it's accurate, though. It is. This movie it's a classic now, the first and the second. I mean, like you said, you'll find channels that are running marathons of both movies or double features pretty much from the middle of November until into January. These movies are everywhere. The residuals alone must keep Macaulay Culkin retired. But it's everywhere. I mean, you can't escape it. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I didn't see it in theaters, but like I said, I know I had the Talkboy. The hype was unbelievable, and it's been there ever since. Can't escape it.
The movie was first released November 20th of 1992, a mere 2 years after the original, made on a budget of $28 million, and at the box office, it brings in $359 million. That is a heck of a return for 1992 and profitable in any decade when you look at that original budget. However, it is not as well received as the first movie, hence its own episode here on Best of the Rest. Critically, it holds just a 35% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is firmly in the rotten category. The first one is certified fresh. I think it's somewhere in the 60s. It's not the most praised, but by all accounts, you look at the fan audience reception, it's definitely a lot warmer towards that first one when you look at these movies with a critical eye than the second.
Yeah, I just wanted to look at this because you mentioned this was the third highest grossing film of 1992, so I wanted to take a quick look at the top 10 just to see if there were any strange... And again, it's just so strange to look at these movies and see what the worldwide gross is and that making it number one, when nowadays it wouldn't even crack like the top 20. Number one for 92 is Aladdin with 504 million worldwide, which is nothing to shake a stick at the time. Number 2 is The Bodyguard with 411 million, which I forget how much of an insane hit that movie really was, from the theme to the box office to everything. A few, like Batman Returns is in there, Lethal Weapon 3, Basic Instinct. But I do love that at number 10 is Wayne's World with a massive 183 million.
God, like, it is the 10th highest grossing of the year.
The notion that 183 million worldwide was enough to be a top 10 highest grossing film of the year is just insane to me. That's just so ridiculous.
And like a low budget SNL comedy, right? I mean, that's just... In
like,
fact,
I mean, you think about what this movie cost. This movie cost $28 million. I think Wayne's World cost like 20. So that's the other crazy part, is these movies are making tons of money off these small budgets, where now it's kind of unheard of.
Yeah, and you look at Aladdin being number 1, Home Alone 2 number 3. Like, these are like family films was where the money was at the time, because everybody can go see it, and that's obviously evolved to like PG-13 these days and franchises, and we all know what's a hit these days. But the Pixars still make money. But it used to really be the bread and butter, that family stuff. And then you had these comedies, like Wayne's World break through like regularly, and those are. I'm not gonna say they don't make him anymore, but they're more likely to not crack the top 10 or go straight to streaming. The landscape has just changed. But
well, and then just the dramas that are in here, like The Bodyguard, Basic Instinct, A Few Good Men, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like these are just like weird, strange prestige dramas that nowadays I feel like would struggle to get noticed by anybody. Yet at the time, they were just these massive hits. It's always a fun little look back to see just how these things played out. And this is such a weird list of movies to be the top 10.
I saw The Bodyguard for the first time within the past 5 years, probably. Pop culturally, I'm familiar with it.
Right.
I knew the basic concept. I knew the song, of course. And despite knowing those things, despite knowing the song, I still watched the movie. And then, like, halfway through, I'm like, oh, this is a romance between Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston. I didn't... What a concept for a film.
Yeah.
And I get that. I mean, in my mind, Kevin Costner is old and has always been old.
Right.
I get that he wasn't that old when that movie came out, but it still feels like an old man wooing a biggest pop star on the planet. But
it really does in a lot of ways. I mean, Whitney Houston was born in 1963. Kevin Costner was. I mean, there's only an 8-year difference between them. It's very.
I'm not calling the movie out. It's not weird, but it's more in my mind.
But I still get it. I still get it. It's very weird. But yeah, anyway, back to the task at hand.
Yeah, let's take a look at the creative team here. The movie is written by John Hughes, a man that needs no introduction, as you're saying, who. I mean, you can't think of 80s without thinking of John Hughes. Can't think of teen comedies without thinking of John Hughes. And he does go beyond, I mean, probably most famous for things like 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club, but beyond that, things like the Home Alone movies or Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, he had his hand in all types of films and family films and beyond just the coming-of-age stories. But no doubt, probably most known for those. And God, there's not much to say about the man that hasn't already been said, at least about his work. But I would just say that movies like The Breakfast Club, the ones I was just mentioning, they might feel dated now. I'm not saying they're not popular. I'm sure kids are still getting into them and everything. But you might watch it and be like, well, high school is not really like that. But at the time, like looking at the landscape of movies at the time, those were speaking to kids in a way that movies never had. It really was like a revelation. And it was a step in a direction. And it continued to evolve. I mean, for our generation, I think Superbad, especially if you're male, was maybe the first time we saw ourselves on screen, and it's continued to evolve. Movies, we've had this conversation, Andrew, movies like Lady Bird now, they're getting to the point where it's like, oh, they just like have a camera in a high school. Like these are kids on screen being kids.
Yeah.
But you don't get to that point without first going through the John Hughes era. And so I think you really can't overstate how important that step was in that genre of films.
Absolutely. I think like it's easy to kind of, like you said, it's easy to look back at a lot of things. Like Citizen Kane as an easy reference. Like when you tell somebody that people see Citizen Kane as the greatest film of all time, and then somebody will watch it and be like, yeah, it was fine, because the mindset is so different. Or like when you watch, like I think I told you to watch Akira, and you were just like, I don't know if it's that Akira isn't grabbing me, or if it's that I've just seen so many other things do those things already that it's not landing like it would have. And I think John Hughes falls into a similar kind of mindset of like, it's easy to kind of be dismissive and kind of see them as these like kind of whiny teen dramas even. But when you think about those people seeing themselves on screen for the first time in a serious way that was trying to actually make them fully fleshed out characters in a way that really wasn't being done at the time. Because that's something that, you know, there's a lot of stereotypes and there's a lot of trends in film that unfortunately persisted for a very long time. But kids kind of being these one-dimensional characters wasn't uncommon. And John Hughes is one of the first guys who really wanted to take the teenage experience and portray it on screen in an authentic way, while still being funny and still having, a good time with it. But it really, like you said, it can't be understated. And just the things that like people may not even be aware that he was involved in. Like he writes the first 3 vacation movies, and people don't even really realize that he was a part of those.
Yeah, I thought National Lampoon wrote that. Mr. Lampoon.
Yeah, Mr. Lampoon. I always wondered why his parents didn't like him and named him that. And just even as you get into the 90s, you can still see that, like, he writes Home Alone 3, which doesn't have any of the same cast in it as this one. We can talk more about that later, but, like, he still writes Home Alone 3, even though it's a completely separate, different thing. And even has a story credit on the Jennifer Lopez classic, Made in Manhattan, starring my boy, Ralph Fiennes. And, but, yeah, like you said, we could go on and on about John Hughes. It's been stated a lot. A very reclusive man towards the end of his life. There is a very interesting documentary that was made about it called... I forget what it was called now that I'm trying to think about it. It's just called Don't You Forget About Me. And it was about some 4 Canadian filmmakers who went in search of Hughes after he kind of disappeared after like 94-ish. His movies kind of stopped having as much success and he kind of just disappeared. That's already that's already more than enough to go on. But like you said, you can't understate the influence that he's had on so many people. And yeah, there are the people that are looking at a lot of them and seeing that there's some potentially problematic stuff, but you can do that with almost everything. But for a whole generation, John Hughes was their voice, and it's a big thing.
Big RAP to John Hughes. And one last thing before we move on to the director. The opening credit to this movie says, first, based on characters created by John Hughes. Normally you see that when like someone else takes, they make a sequel to a movie, the writer doesn't come back, they got to acknowledge who created the characters. But the very next credit is written and produced by John Hughes. So I think it's so weird that they needed to list both of those.
That happened with Glass Onion too. Like you see a lot of credit that based on characters created by Rian Johnson in a movie written produced, and directed by John Johnson. It's I'm guessing that's like a guild thing. Like that's just it's I assume it's a writers guild thing where like they just have to not just credit the current film, but if it's a sequel or a derivative work of something previous, that's something the guild I think is still making sure they get. So because if it hadn't been Hughes that wrote and directed it, I think he would still get some kind of residual for writing
creating
the
characters.
So so it's fun legalese, I'm sure.
The movie's directed by Chris Columbus. The man, of course, just goes by Chris Columbus. I'll tell you, Andrew, growing up, every kid gets picked on in some way for their name, and bullies try to come up with something clever. And the best anybody could ever do for me was, hey, Chris Columbus, always comparing me to this director. So that's how I got bullied. It's definitely the reference they were making as they bullied.
Yeah, they weren't at all comparing you to that genocidal madman.
I say it was kind of funny is at the time I was always like, all right, you compare me to the guy who discovered America or whatever, like what's the big deal? And then like I got older and I'm like, wait a minute. Those bullies didn't know how cruel that was.
Did they know?
Yeah, probably not.
This whole time? No, yeah, I always got made fun of for the red hair, and I always thought that was odd because it really, the only comeback I really had is congratulations on having eyes, I guess, because like I know I have red hair. I know, so thank you for reminding me. I guess.
You got off for a redhead. I think you got off easy because you don't have the super curly red hair. That is hard to escape the bullies, I think.
And I don't have like the super pale skin with all the freckles either. So I really am a daywalker. Like in a lot of ways, I'm not the prototypical ginger. But Yeah.
This director, Chris Columbus, filmmaker, I should say, because the man does just about everything there is to do other than acting in front of the camera. Writer, director, producer on movies that everyone knows and loves. You could probably call him like a journeyman director because he doesn't have a definitive auteur style that's instantly recognizable. And that's not a slight at the man by any means. He's got crazy longevity, very dependable. Studios love him for that reason. And it almost, I guess, I don't want that to sound like an insult calling him journeyman director because there's nothing wrong with making a career out of directing Hollywood films. But he's like cream of the crop in that genre, I would say. So starting his career, breaking in as a writer, I mean, just going through the list here, writing on Gremlins and The Goonies, making his turn into a director with Adventures in Babysitting, which is a bit of a cult classic these days. Of course, directed both Home Alone movies, Mrs. Doubtfire, Bicentennial Man, which is a Robin Williams movie I've got a bit of a soft spot for. Directs 2 of the Harry Potter movies. I mean, just continuing to this day to pop up in mostly family-friendly movies, and that's kind of the man's bread and butter. And like I said, you have seen multiple Chris Columbus movies, no doubt.
Yeah, I don't think the journeyman thing is an insult at all. Like, I think there's just directors who, like Martin Campbell is, I really like the stuff he tends to do. But if you ask me what Martin Campbell's style was, like I love Casino Royale. Casino Royale is still one of my favorite James Bond movies, but Martin Campbell is not somebody I would call an auteur. Sure. But you've seen something he's directed, and then his producer credits. I mean, he is a producer on a little film called Jingle All the Way, which, again, you'll hear us talking about it in a couple of weeks. But he's everywhere, and like you said, he's still out there working. He just directed The Christmas Chronicles 2 after just being a producer on the first one. And so he's out there and getting to work with Kurt Russell. So like I don't really know what more you could want for yourself at this point in your life. That's got to be a pretty cool feeling.
If that's not success, I don't know what is.
As far as I'm concerned, it's the best success possible. You get to direct movies and be friends with Kurt Russell. But yeah, tons of credits. It's very interesting to me that he breaks in as a writer, and then for so many of his directing efforts, he doesn't write. I just find that a little interesting because typically you're a writer and then you kind of branch into the writer-director, and that kind of blends more to him kind of being a journeyman, is that he's directed a lot of movies that he didn't write. And in fact, more often than not, he doesn't write the things he directs, and maybe just doesn't want the added pressure. But and yeah, I mean, the first 2 Harry Potter movies, he directs the first 2, which were massive hits, starts of that massive film franchise that itself is still kind of going today. At least it's attempting to. But yeah, he's out there. You've seen stuff he's done, and I gotta say, his movies have brought me a lot of enjoyment throughout my life, so I can't complain.
Well, I think it's time we jump into a specific movie that this man directed called Home Alone 2. You ready?
Yep.
Ten-year-old Kevin McAllister's family is going to Florida for Christmas, but at the airport, Kevin mistakenly ends up on the wrong plane and lands in New York City with nothing but his talk boy and his dad's wallet. While his family tries to track him down, Kevin enjoys his time in the Big Apple as he cons his way into a luxury hotel stay and sees the sights of the city. But his past soon catches up with him when he crosses paths with escaped convicts Harry and Marv, 2 criminals he helped send to prison just a year prior. Now, Kevin must use his wits and household materials to stay one step ahead of the bad guys yet again. Andrew, this is probably the most pointless synopsis I have ever done. Who doesn't know the plot to a Home Alone movie? By golly, everyone listening to this probably knows exactly what to expect for this movie. Everyone who was walking into the theaters in 1992 probably knew exactly what to expect, right?
I would imagine so. This is a movie that I don't know if there's a trailer you could make for it that wouldn't inadvertently tell you exactly what the plot of this movie is.
We're going to jump into it, all of our favorite scenes and everything that the movie is doing well. But first thing we do is dive into this cast, starting with the high point, the best casting and best performance of the film. Every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Home Alone 2, Lost in New York?
I'm going to give a shout out here to our good friend, Doug. And I got to give my Mark Strong to a performance that he and I joke about rather regularly. I'm giving it to Tim Curry as, I don't even know what his character's name is.
Mr. Hector.
Mr. Hector, credited as concierge. So it doesn't even have a name.
That's wild, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen That Thing You Do.
I have not. I've heard you talk about it enough. I feel like I've seen a name, but I have not seen it.
The bass player in the band is credited as the bass player, which seems so odd to me that even like in post, you couldn't think of just a name to give this man. But anyway, so I'm giving it to Tim Curry. It's very strange that he doesn't have a name credited as concierge, but he essentially plays the villain of the first half of the movie, because there's basically two halves of this movie. There's the first half where it's kind of Kevin versus the hotel, sort of, and then the second half is when it's Kevin versus Harry and Marv again. But Tim Curry is, first off, he's the greatest actor of all time. From things like Rocky Horror to Clue, a thing that we're both huge fans of at this point. I'm never sad when Tim Curry's on my screen, and he is at his, I don't know if this is peak Tim Curry, but it's pretty close. So.
He's getting to the point. We've talked about how Sean Connery, like later in his career, leaned into his speech pattern, and I feel like Tim Curry, by this point, has recognized that he's kind of known for his just Tim Curry isms, and I think he plays them up a little bit more at this point in his career, and we are all the better for it.
Especially playing the villain here, I think it definitely adds to it. It definitely, you want the villain to be as conniving and ridiculous as possible, and he's up to that. He's up to that task, and so he disappears almost completely for the second half of this movie, as do most of the hotel people. They only come back a few times when the family shows up at the hotel, but he's just so ridiculous and sniveling and conniving, and I can't help but just be entertained by it. So yes, my Mark Strong for Home Alone 2 Lost in New York is going to Tim Curry as the concierge.
I mean, I agree 100%, Andrew. Also getting my Mark Strong Award. I knew going into this recording that we were going to agree on a Mark Strong Award. It's Tim Curry. I should say an alum of the show. We talked about him back on our episode for
The Shadow?
The Shadow. I almost said The Spirit. We've done a lot of the
Shadow.
The Phantom, the Spirit, The Shadow.
The S word.
Yes. Yeah, and his part was a bit smaller there, but we recognize that he was really, again, playing up the Tim Curry isms there as well. But gosh, I love this man, and I'm thankful he's still with us. He's definitely had his some health concerns and issues in the recent decade, but still out there. Still doing his thing and making occasional public appearances, and I'm thankful he's still with us. But Tim Curry, man, if you were to go up and down his career, his filmography, probably just collecting Mark Strong Awards left and right. Even if he's got small bit parts, he's always a standout. I don't even, like, it reminds me, it's going to sound like strange at first, but it reminds me a bit of like Jim Carrey, where you're like, is it overacting? And if it is, do I care? Because it's just so damn entertaining, right? Like, it doesn't make sense for anyone to really act this way, but gosh, it's charismatic as hell.
I can't. I got it completely. I would ask this. This is a bit of a sidebar, but does he get the Mark Strong for Clue?
I think so. I mean,
I'm leaning towards yes, but that's another one that's a very tough decision because there's a lot of people bringing their A game in Clue.
it's a lot like Knives Out or Glass Onion, where like you got this eclectic all-star killer cast, and you might be drawn to one of the other characters more. And if you gave someone else the Mark Strong Award, that's totally cool. But his role there is like the glue that holds it
Right.
together and connects them all. And for me, what's going to seal him getting the Mark Strong Award is reenacting the
Yes,
solution
yes.
at the end of the movie multiple times. Just reenacting the entire film
Yeah, pretty much.
single-handedly. It's incredible. I mean, you've got to give him the Mark Strong Award for that reason.
I think the only person that immediately comes to mind as potentially otherwise getting it for me would be Madeline Kahn as Mrs. White. I think she's just for the flame scene alone is just
Yes,
so
I agree.
iconic. But otherwise, I agree that like Tim Curry is just the work he's putting into that movie that no one's gonna watch at the time it comes out is amazing.
Tim Curry, now a Mark Strong Award winner. Very well deserved. I'm sure we'll talk plenty more about the performance whenever we jump to scenes. But first, we got to go through the rest of the cast here. Let's take a look at our lead, a young Macaulay Culkin. Plays Kevin McAllister, of course. It's not an exaggeration to say there was a time when Macaulay Culkin was one of the biggest box office stars in the world. Just making family films. Comes to prominence with Home Alone, but then you've got, I mean, at least for me, and I'm sure for you growing up in that era, movies like Richie Rich are like a big deal. I'm not really sure how that did at the box office. The Good Son we've talked about before, which is like his dark turn, doing a not happy family friendly thing, but dude was like on top of the world. Magazine covers with Michael Jackson. I mean, he was like he was everywhere, and
He was, and
I've thought of, okay, this is gonna sound probably backhanded at moments, but take a walk with me here. I'm trying to think like what made this kid really connect so much and catapult to stardom, because I don't think it's because he was an insanely good child actor, which I know that sounds insulting, but like I think someone like Haley Joel Osment or Abigail Breslin got people's attention because they were kids, but they were like just as good as their adult co-stars on screen and had just very good actors. And I know we give kids a break whenever they are, child actors. We kind of give them a little bit of leeway and grade them on a curve, I guess is the way to put it. And so I don't think Macaulay Culkin is like just a wonderful actor as a kid. I think what catapults him is, one, he's a cute kid. You can't deny that. Just a little all-American blonde-haired boy. But I think he's a bit odd. And I think of scenes like from the first Home Alone where he's like trying to get that toothbrush and he's asking if it's recommended by the American Dental Association. Like a thing like a 9-year-old boy wouldn't do. Right. And he does that a lot in this movie as well. Like, I'm 10 years old in the city. What do you mean? Do you think I'm alone? And like talks he's just odd. He's just a bit of an oddball. And I think that right. combination of being cute and kind of being odd is what made him connect so well with America. And even like later in his like resurgence when he comes back in movies like Saved, which I highly recommend and really enjoy. And what's that one he did with Seth Green? Party Monster,
Party Monster.
Like he really leans into like the oddball thing, and he's got projects going now. He's got this website and brand that I don't quite understand, but again, leans into like being just a bit weird. Of an oddball. Being weird, and that's kind of his brand, even from the beginning, I think.
Yeah, I think so. He's recently shown up in he just did the American Horror Story double feature. He was in a few episodes of that, and then was in a couple episodes of The Righteous Gemstones, which is another one that I highly recommend to everybody. It's, Danny McBride, John Goodman, Walton Goggins. You can't go wrong with that group. But, and I mean, he's got the 3 John Hughes movies kind of back to back there. I mean, it's Uncle Buck, Home Alone, and Home Alone 2 together. So he's got 3 performances where that kind of elevated dialogue is given to his character. And I think that is definitely part, like he's got that scene in Uncle Buck where like he's interrogating John Candy. And it's that weird flip because like a kid asking an adult a bunch of questions isn't uncommon, but the questions he's asking like are uncommon because they're like deeply, like weirdly personal questions. And so I think those 3 things kind of all in a row definitely help. Obviously, him dying in My Girl traumatized us for the rest of our lives.
Spoilers, Andrew. Jeez.
Sorry. Spoilers for that 31-year-old kids movie. Where
that's a movie I've never seen, but I know what happens. I know why people cry. I know the line, and I don't think I'll ever watch. That's not the line.
I know it's not. I went to Wicker Man and I couldn't let it go.
I don't think I'll ever watch it though. I'm sure it's good, but gosh,
but you're right. He in the mid '90s though, 93, 94 is like The Good Son, The Page Master, and Richie Rich, and those are kind of 3 instances where he kind of breaks the mold away from the Hughes dialogue and kind of just moves into these, just kind of child actor type roles, and the success kind of wanes. The appeal of Macaulay Culkin kind of doesn't propel all of these things to being massive successes. Like Page Master was a massive flop. I remember Page Master when it came out.
Oh yeah,
I remember watching it a lot as a kid. Richie Rich, very similar. These were movies that were not cheap and weren't making a bunch of money. And I think,
but movies that were being sold on the Macaulay Culkin name. Like, it's a Macaulay Culkin film. Yeah.
So, like, 94, he pretty much does nothing between 94 and 2003. And, I could easily imagine he was like, I'm going to go finish, like, being a child before I try to jump back. And then he kind of comes back there in the mid-2000s. And then he's had his struggles. He's had his troubles. There's plenty of stories about the toll taken on child actors and how it kind of definitely impacts their development because their kind of sense of the world gets very skewed being so famous. Like, Macaulay Culkin got like $4.5 million to be in this movie. And he was like 11? Like, Jesus Christ. Like, whereas I think in the first one, he got paid like $110,000. And it's like, I can't imagine being that old. How old would he have been when this movie came out? He was born in 1980. So he would have been 11 when this movie was being shot, and he just made $4.5 million for a movie. That's insane. That's ridiculous. So
I would never work again in my life.
I imagine that he doesn't. Like, I imagine Macaulay Culkin truly, honestly does not need to ever work again based off of the residuals alone from the movies he was in. But, yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I saw all throughout my childhood. He was like a weird cipher for kids in a lot of ways. Yeah. And I think that was, you just kind of talk about how John Hughes made those movies that kind of allowed the 80s teenagers to feel seen. I won't go as far as to say, like, Macaulay Culkin's roles in his movies were meant to make the kids feel seen, but I think kids still saw his characters and immediately were able to be like, oh, I'm like that. I'm that age. And I think that still happens now to a degree with these movies, and it's probably part of why they've got some sustained success, is kids can still watch it and be like, oh, that's me. I have all these problems with my family. I, have all these things that I can directly kind of relate to with some of these characters.
And what little kid wouldn't love to have the house all to themselves and eat all the ice cream they want, or get a hotel room all for themselves and they go to the pool and, live out these fantasies that little kids have. Yeah, I think it's a very good point. Let's take a look at our returning villains from the first movie. We'll just talk about them together. We have Joe Pesci as Harry and Daniel Stern as Marv, formerly the Wet Bandits, now going by the Sticky Bandits. And I want to do a quick shout out. I'm pulling this cast from Wikipedia, and someone had fun putting in the character descriptions. Joe Pesci as Harry, a short, hot-tempered thief. Daniel Stern as Marv, a tall, dim-witted thief. One's short, one's tall. That's the Mario and Luigi thing going there.
Yep.
But their chemistry together is fantastic. It's not reinventing anything. You have Joe Pesci, who is smart and, making the plans and determined, and Daniel Stern as Marv, who, like that description says, is dim-witted and always screwing up. And, Joe Pesci practically slaps him to, focus on the task at hand kind of thing. It's a dynamic that we've seen plenty of times before, but this is one of the best uses of it. These two together, other than when they're like separated at the house going through the traps, they don't like have any scenes where they're not together. I mean, them playing off of each other, and of course playing off of Macaulay Culkin defines their characters, and it's great. I love it. The script does some heavy lifting to get them involved this time around from the first one. But the first one being the success that it was, you got to imagine they were like, we have to have Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern back in the sequel. Do what you have to do to make it happen.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't not have certified movie star Daniel Stern and Joe Pesci in your first movie without having them show up again in your second movie. I mean, like it like I said, the script goes through some intense lifting to get them involved with the plot. And like I said, they kind of mostly sit out the first half of the movie. Like I said, we've kind of got like two weird dueling movies here where there's this Kevin lost in New York. That's kind of our first thing. But then, like I said, we kind of slide back into this kind of redux of the first movie where it's Marv and Harry and they're after Kevin and he's got a new house full of traps. But, I mean, Joe Pesci, he's Joe Pesci. I mean, that guy's got a life pass for My Cousin Vinny alone. But you look at everything else he's done, from Goodfellas to Casino, his big part in the Lethal Weapon series, even his return in like The Irishman and a couple of other things. He's fantastic. There's not enough good things I can say about Joe Pesci. But he does Goodfellas and Home Alone in the same year. That's
so wild.
That's ridiculous.
His performance as Harry is one of my favorite, what would you call it? Like subverting expectations. He's known for being extremely foul-mouthed, right? And then he's in a family film, and he's still playing a criminal like he does often. So I guess it's not that much of a subversion, but still, you don't think of him, one, being in a family film, and two, doing all the slapstick stuff and getting tortured throughout the movie and stuff, and in the fun Looney Tunes way that he does. But it's one of my favorite instances of that. And what I really love is, from what I understand about the man, like in real life, he really is pretty foul-mouthed as well. Like, it's not too much of a stretch whenever he's dropping F-bombs in the movies. And I think it might have been a struggle for him not to let those slip throughout the making of these movies. But his strategy seems to be, and whenever I feel like I'm going to use a curse word, I'm going to do the most extreme mumbling you've ever heard. And much like my Tim Curry impression being my Joe Pesci impression would be, he's constantly making those noises. And you can kind of fill in the blanks with what you might want to be saying at those times.
Right,
but,
of course.
It never gets old for me.
No, it's fantastic. Joe Pesci is great. I'm never sad to see him on my screen. I'm glad to see him kinda out there again. He came back for The Irishman. He's apparently got a bit part in an upcoming TV series that's apparently based off of a fictionalized version of Pete Davidson's life. So, fortunately, I'm going to have to watch something with Pete Davidson in it. But I'm willing to make that sacrifice. Daniel Stern, switching gears a little bit, is another one that I remember seeing a lot of in the early to mid 90s, and then he disappeared.
Just name the movie, Andrew. What movie other than Home Alone? What do you associate with this man?
Bushwhacked.
Yes. Yes. Another movie that, let me check the box office really quick. $7.9 million. So not a huge hit, but if for me,
you saw it everywhere.
Very big movie. I watched over. It's up there with Ernest Goes to Camp or Heavyweights. These aren't box office smashes, but like I had the VHS and I watched it all the time.
Yeah, like obviously City Slickers might be the more identifiable success that he had kind of in between the Home Alones. That was a movie made $180 million. So I kind of get why people were like, oh, there might be something to this guy. Home Alone and City Slickers back to back. But it's also in Rookie of the Year, another movie that I saw a lot as a kid. He actually directs Rookie of the Year as well, as an odd move. I didn't realize that was the thing he did. But yeah, he's... but then like the mid-90s wear off and he kind of disappears by and large from the public eye. One movie he is in that I think is very funny that it exists is there's a movie called Celtic Pride or Celtic Pride, I guess, because it's based off of the Celtics. But it's written by Judd Apatow and Colin Quinn, which are two people that I didn't imagine writing a film together, and then stars Daniel Stern and Dan Aykroyd. And it's one of those movies that I see and I'm like, it's so odd that this exists. Like this
Venn diagram of creators coming together.
This Venn diagram of creators, but also just the notion of what the movie's about and like all of that is just such a weird. It's like, you know, we're gonna make a movie about the Boston Celtics. Who should be in it? Daniel Stern and Dan Aykroyd. Okay, all right, that's not the worst idea we've had this year, folks. But yeah, anyway, he was everywhere for a while. I mean, like I said, the early to mid '90s, that dude was propped up as a fairly big deal, but didn't quite work out. Still out there, you know, still making his appearances. Did a fun little City Slickers short video where they ended up in Westworld, and just fun things like that. So still out there doing his thing, but he's definitely probably at his. This would have been right after City Slickers, so he's definitely at his peak, if there is such a thing, right here.
I do want to shout out, he has a successful second career as an artist, doing bronze sculptures. Pretty successful, has artwork on display throughout California, and apparently has done a lot of like private commissions and appears in a lot of galleries and stuff. So no doubt a talented man. We can make jokes about his star power waning or whatever, but an extremely talented individual, should be recognized for that.
And he has a son that's a California state senator, so good for them.
Good for them. Let's take a look at the McAllister family, returning as Kevin's mother, who again, I'm looking at the cast list, it says her name was Kate. I'm not sure I knew that. I just know it was Kevin McAllister's mother, Mrs. McAllister, but played by the wonderful Catherine O'Hara.
Chris. Hashtag PP. These movies do her real dirty.
Go on, Andrew. You have the floor. Air your grievances.
Mostly, it's that anybody who's seen SCTV, Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, A Mighty Wind, For Your Consideration, Schitt's Creek, any of those, knows how immensely, insanely funny this woman is. And she never gets to be funny in either of these movies. She is so funny. Like, doesn't matter what she's in, she's almost always a highlight. But in this movie, she's just so straight, like, to everything else that's going on. And it just feels like a little bit of a sad waste that she couldn't get in on the comedy just a little bit. But
I can agree with that, because obviously growing up, these movies are basically my introduction to her. And as a kid, I thought of Catherine O'Hara as the ultimate mom. You need a mom, you get Catherine O'Hara. She's the mom in Beetlejuice, where she gets to be a little more eccentric, to be fair, but she is the mom. And then the Home Alone movie, she's the mom, and she's got her famous catchphrase, Kevin! But I agree with you, because it wasn't until probably like the Christopher Guest movies where I saw her like, oh, wait a minute, she's actually very funny. And then Schitt's Creek, which might be the best work of her career, just gets to be incredibly funny. But yeah, she's always been hilarious. We just didn't know it as children. I grew up in the or came up through the improv scene. But hashtag PP, Andrew, she gets a few moments, I think, to be funny, and it gets shortchanged. She has more to offer. I agree with all of that, but I will say, in particular, there's a scene where her and Kevin's dad are explaining to the police that they have lost their son again. And they let's say, like, as a positive, well, we've never lost any luggage. And then they both start laughing for like 30 seconds straight. And the
Yeah.
cop is like staring at
What?
him because their son is missing and they're finding humor. And that, I think, is a pretty funny scene.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, at the end of this movie, where she is pleading to an officer, she's literally
Yes.
walking the streets of New York trying to find her son. And she's pleading to an officer to help look for him. And she has this dialogue about how much she misses him. And if she was lost, she would have no hope. But her son is brave and she knows he's fine. She nails that dramatic part. And you're like, oh,
Absolutely.
this is like the despite the circumstances of these two movies, this is the best mom ever that loves her kid, loves her children. And then when she reunites with Kevin, it's a very sweet, genuine, earned moment, in large part because of her performance as Kevin's mom.
I agree. So yeah, don't get me wrong. She's completely and utterly capable of doing exactly what's asked of her here and does a fantastic job at it. It's just, you can see how funny she is and everything else. But yeah, she's no slouch here whatsoever. Like I said, that speech you just mentioned is, it's fantastic. It hits, it lands, you buy completely that she is this mother desperately looking for her child. She successfly gets the New York Police Department to assist her. Not an easy task for anyone, but she's Catherine O'Hara. She's fantastic. If you haven't seen her in any of her more overtly comedic roles, I highly recommend checking out like Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, or just Schitt's Creek if you kind of want just a wonderful show with so many funny people on it. But she's
or
fantastic.
if you love Schitt's Creek, the dynamic between her and Eugene Levy, definitely check out those Christopher Guest movies. In particular, I would say A Mighty Wind, where their relationship in that movie is wonderful and it's hilarious.
Yes. And also, they have a different kind of relationship in Best in Show, but it's still very funny. It's actually very funny that she's been in that weird. She's been in so many things where she has a very strange relationship with Eugene Levy, but they're all different and they're all wonderful.
Right.
So,
Yes.
but yes, can't say enough about Catherine O'Hara. But like you said, you see her as the ultimate mom because of these movies and that very well positioned hair. I don't know how it's doing that, but
mom hair,
hair, 100%. But she's fantastic. You can't ever go. Also, the voice of Sally in Nightmare Before Christmas. I
always forget that.
Yeah. Always like weird to just be like, oh yeah, she's Sally.
And then we have Kevin's father, played by John Hurd, whose name is Peter, but come on, he's Kevin's dad. Similar to Catherine O'Hara being known for one thing or talented in one thing and actually something different, John Hurd is like a very serious, almost prestige straight man actor, a bit of a journeyman, mostly supporting roles throughout his career. But again, known for more of like the like a drama roles. I mean, you'll see him in movies like Snake Eyes or The Pelican Brief, serious stuff. And here he's in like a family comedy where he's not particularly that serious or dramatic and not funny. It's just he's playing a dad. What I do want to shout out for this role, and this is a credit to John Hurd and the script, is that I love that he's not the worst version of like the sitcom dad where he's like, oh, honey, you're overreacting, and son, he'll be fine. Like he's a loving father. He cares about his son. He's worried about his son. He seems to have a great relationship with Catherine O'Hara's character. They seem to genuinely love each other and always be on the same side. It's a very healthy family dynamic, which to this day seems a bit rare to see portrayed on screen, but even in the early 90s, it didn't happen very often. But I do like seeing that. And I think Uncle Frank gets all of those. It works best as an uncle, like the uncle being the one that falls asleep at the kids' play or makes the crash jokes. Like that's cool. Let the uncle do that. Let the dad be a loving dad, and he is, and he's great at that.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Yeah, it's very strange that he does have all these roles, but then he shows up in things like White Chicks. So like there's he's really, in a way, I guess he's really just like just a big character actor. Like you need somebody to show up and give the role a little bit of seriousness and a little bit of maybe not as much as some others, but a little bit of that what am I talking about, Chris?
Gravitas. Why do I sing it? That's not just nothing. I don't even know where this is coming from at this point.
No, I have no idea. But
gravitas.
There we go. Yeah, I've seen him. I remember him in this movie my parents really liked called My Fellow Americans, which is about two former presidents that get caught up in like a weird political conspiracy. But one's a Democrat, one's a Republican, so they don't get along, and then at the end of the movie they do get along. But he plays this weird, kind of conniving guy in that one. But I just remember in that movie his character, at the end when they think he's getting exposed, goes, "They'll all never know that it was all just a big facade." And just walks off. And as a kid, I clearly didn't know what that joke meant. I was like, What? And my dad had to be like, "It's because you say it facade." And I was like, "Oh, so is he dumb?" Like I didn't, as a kid, you just don't understand. But yeah, he's, like I said, I do like the dynamic they have. He comes off as a invested father, and I don't know what that dude does, but he got to be making bank to take 14 people on vacation 2 years in a row. Like,
well, it's the uncle that's paying for the vacation to be, well, at least in the first movie. I'm trying to remember this. The first movie, the uncle's flying him to Paris. I think the movie they do say he is paying for it.
And this one, yeah, because he says your dad's paying good money. Uncle Frank says
he can afford to take him on a domestic vacation.
Okay.
But if it's international,
so is it his brother in New York? Oh, because he says, are they back from Paris yet? So I guess they're still in Paris from the first movie because they were flying them out to Paris.
It's like a year after the first movie. You think they're still in Paris?
I mean, their house is still being renovated, so they got nowhere. That dude must be that dude.
Dude, I love that renovation means you completely gut the house of everything and like tear down the walls, and there's a hole in the floor. Like that's a hell of a renovation. It's building a whole new house inside.
Yeah, I mean, when there are people with the money to do such a thing, but yeah. So, but then like the house they have and things like that, people are always like, "What does he do?" And I'm like, "He smuggles drugs, guys. Come on." This is easy.
I think I was just reading about this on Reddit because that comes up like every year. Like, what do they do? And I think the mom is a fashion designer because there's mannequins throughout their house. So she makes good money. And I want to say he is in like, I think there's something very generic like marketing or something like finance
accounting or something. Yeah.
So yeah, they could be loaded. Plus, it was the early '90s, better economy at the time.
But yeah.
Now, there's a lot of other McAllisters we could go through. Kevin's cousin is played by his younger brother, Kieran Culkin, who has had a successful career since then in his own right, which I think is kind of fun. But they're such bit parts. I don't know if we really need to dive into each of them. I'm sure they come up through various scenes. But I do want to recognize someone else in the hotel, alum of the show, Rob Schneider. Plays the character Cedric, who does have a name because Tim Curry says it several times as he's barking orders at him. So I do remember that. Exactly. But Rob Schneider, we talked about him back on our Judge Doom. That spinoff. We talked about him. We talked about him back on our Judge Dredd episode. And this is, man, when people think of Rob Schneider these days, the first thing that comes to mind is probably like, which, no offense to Rob Schneider, but I think people got sick of him by the end of the 90s and early 2000s. Eventually, he kind of develops his own brand with movies like The Hot Chick and The Animal. But the early 90s, it's definitely like SNL era Rob Schneider. He's just a guy. He's just a comedic actor just playing these bit parts. And I think he's more than fine at them. I think it's pretty funny in this. I like the running gag where he asks for a tip, but he gets chewing gum instead. He's a good slapstick foil and takes few good hits and very good alongside Tim Curry. Nothing but positive things to say about him in this role here.
Yeah, I think he's doing a good job. I think he's also kind of been out there and said some dumb things here lately, but he's another guy that, like, you can't deny that there was a period of time that Rob Schneider was, to borrow wrestling terminology, he was a bit of a draw, brother. But
he's a good hand.
Solid hand. never drew a dime. But no, he plays really well off of Tim Curry, and I do want to shout out. Not a whole lot else to say, but Dana Ivey plays the front desk clerk of the hotel staff. They kind of form the core of the group, trying to kind of find out the truth of what's going on with Kevin. And she's just another fantastic journeyman actress that's done a great job, and always nice to see her on my screen. I remember her from Barry Sonnenfeld's Addams Family movies, but yeah, in this movie, Rob Schneider is doing exactly what needs to be done. He is playing off of all the other people well. He's got good chemistry with everybody, and like you said, he takes some hits and he makes it look good. I do want to shout out Gary Bauman, who plays Uncle Frank, just because he's such a jerk in these movies.
I love Uncle Frank so much in both of these movies.
He is, but yeah, that's Jerry Bauman, and he's
you get just the right amount of Uncle Frank, right? There's
right.
There's 2 or 3 lines and scenes that are hilarious. He's not overused. Uncle Frank is he's hilarious.
Yeah, he's effectively used. He's a character that, like, from the first one to the second one, I could have easily seen them being like, oh, let's dial up the Uncle Frank. People love that. And thankfully they kept it just right. But just wanted to give a quick shout out to him. And I also want to shout out Eddie Bracken, who plays the Mr. Duncan of Duncan's Toy Chest, who Kevin has.
Yes. Yeah.
Kevin has a very nice conversation with him in the store. And then he kind of plays a part at the ending and making sure they have a really nice Christmas. But I just really like his performance. It's short, but he's a very warm, wholesome person who, like, very much seems invested in the things that he does. Seems to be a giving member of his community. And Eddie Bracken himself, I mean, rest in peace. Eddie Bracken was born in 1915. I mean, by the time this movie was made, he was still almost 80. And he's just got a really good presence for this role. I also remember him notably from The First Vacation. He plays the owner of Wally World, who shows up at the end of the movie when Chevy Chase, holds the staff of the theme park hostage, like you do. He also would show up later in Rookie of the Year. I'm guessing he made a connection with Daniel Stern here, so used him there. But I really like this performance. It's very small, not big, but yeah. Great stuff.
No, that's a great shout out because he's the ultimate, like, nice old man who I don't know how much of that voice is like acting and how much is him playing up being just a sweet old man, but when he's talking to Kevin about donating all the money to the children's hospital and children bring them joy and all that stuff, like it's so on point. It's very, very good.
Oh, I'm not done yet, though. But yes, continue.
Well, no, I think there is one more shout out we should do. I think we're looking at the same person here, Brenda Fricker.
Brenda Fricker. There actually is one more after her, but Brenda Fricker is another one I do want to shout out.
There's a lot of characters in this movie. Can we just acknowledge that real quick? There's so much going on.
It's a very deep cast. But no, Brenda Fricker plays kind of this homeless woman that hangs out with the pigeons, and she's creepy at the beginning, and Kevin screams at her, but she's another one that, like, is revealed to have a warmer side and ends up kind of helping Kevin throughout the second half of the film. She's another one that kind of comes in the second half and kind of basically becomes Kevin's caretaker for a brief time and is ultimately the one who saves him from Harry and Marv when things go a little south this time. She fills the role of, I guess, the neighbor in the first movie that hits him with the shovel. She just hits him with pigeons this time. But yeah, just a very nice, like I said, just a warm, wholesome performance where, maybe this little kid teaches her some lessons too. So
yeah. Also know her from the Mike Myers classic, So I Married an Axe Murderer, where I believe she's playing his mom in that movie.
I believe so.
With the Irish accent.
Also, Angels in the Outfield, another 90s child staple that I saw everywhere. She plays one of the characters in that. But the last one person I want to shout out, and
all right, who else we got?
You can't miss this, Chris, just because it's important. We have to shout out Ralph Foodie, who plays the lead character in Angels with Filthy Souls and Angels with Even Filthier Souls. He is Gangster Johnny. I think that's how he's credited in both of them. But, Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. Like, all of that, that's him.
That's the catchphrase of the movie. Like,
It
the
is.
one, like
And he says
Kevin
it.
McAllister mouths it, but
Yeah.
it's said by him.
It's his line. But yeah, I just I couldn't let us pass that one up for sure. Not a whole lot to say. I've not seen much else of the man's work, and he's apparently a police dispatcher in Blues Brothers, things like that. I just haven't seen a whole lot to know. But he is arguably, like you said, the most iconic part of both of these movies. I don't think it's a stretch to say that.
Maybe the best movie in a movie ever. Definitely in the running, right? I mean,
absolutely.
As a kid, no doubt, you gotta agree with me. You thought those were real old movies.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? You thought those were like genuine. It seems as an
like,
adult.
well, I'm an
it seems
adult. I'm
more...
going to find these movies. I'm going to watch these movies.
Yes, 100%. But looking at it with adult eyes, it can be it's kind of obvious they're more of a parody of the classic noir films. But definitely as a kid, I just assumed they found clips from an old film and worked it into the script. It's very well done, and
very
it's
fun.
Very awesome.
I'm still very mad. Matt Ryan Tobin made posters for both Angels with Filthy Souls and Angels with Even Filthier Souls, and I didn't buy either of them because I told myself I didn't need them because nobody would understand them, and now I hate myself. So, the story of my life. But
always buy the thing, Andrew.
Always. Better treat myself, says the man who has never denied himself a dang thing.
All right, Andrew, let's jump into this film. The best scenes of the film specifically, starting with our favorite scene of the movie. Andrew, go ahead and kick us off here. When is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is your favorite scene in Home Alone 2?
Well, I'm glad I mentioned and made a point to shout out Eddie Bracken, because I'm actually going to go with the conversation he has with Kevin as probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. I say that's why I made a point to call him out in the cast list. But I really like this conversation. You can clearly tell that, like, Mr. Duncan's like a little suspicious of what this kid is doing with all this money, but he still treats him with a respect. Like, he's not treating him like he's a kid. He's giving him a little bit of understanding, and just again, there's this warmth and this hospitality and this just genuine feel to the conversation where you just understand that everything that this guy stands for, everything that he says, everything that he's going to do, it's all real. None of it's, a show. This is a genuine guy. And it all works for me. And I like it because it's one of those moments in this movie. Because, like I said, in the first half of this movie, I don't know why I'm motioning with my hands. Nobody can see it.
I understand.
But
I can hear it in your voice.
But, yeah, you can hear it in my voice. You can hear the wind moving as I move around the mic. But the first half of this movie, the hotel is very much like, it's like Kevin versus the hotel staff in a lot of ways. Like, there's this animosity between them. They don't trust that he's there. Kevin's trying to throw him off his trail, things like that. I'm
pretty sure that was the basis for the Tiger Electronics game, Home Alone 2, Kevin versus the hotel staff. I think it's the location.
I think it is. Definitely. But nice. But yeah, so Mr. Duncan is one of the adults, similar to the pigeon lady, who has no name as well in this movie.
It feels like mean calling her pigeon lady, but that's what the credits say she is.
She is an unnamed woman. Come on, Chris, Mr. Hughes, we could do a little bit better than this. But now you got to make that legacy sequel where you give all these people names. But no, so he is one of the first adults that kind of treats him with an understanding and actually kind of looks out for him a little bit. And kind of has a very nice conversation with him about Christmas, what he wants to do, what he does means to him. And then they have the conversation about the turtle doves, where he kind of thanks him for his donation and gives him the story of that, and how he can give one to somebody that he cares about, and then he can have the other one, and they'll kind of always have that connection together. It's just a very sentimental speech that I think rides that line of not going quite too far to being like, all right, move on, we get it. It's not too sappy. But it all lands. Just fits in with kind of what I think of Christmas, or what I would like to think, just what I envision Christmas as is this thing that's not just about some dope ass movies and some dope ass music, but there's that undercurrent of just hospitality and care and love and all of that.
Looking out for one another.
But I love this scene. I think it's great, and I watched this movie twice today because we took longer to record than I thought we were, so I just put it on again. But I love this scene. Both times it came on, it was one of the moments in the movie where I was definitely like, oh, Mr. Duncan is speaking. I stopped talking. So
this is a great shout out, Andrew. I wouldn't have. This is a very good pick for best scene. It's not what I picked, but I'm almost like second guessing myself now because I mentioned in the beginning of this episode where we're talking about just how much I love Christmas movies and stuff that like I love like the Christmas magic, and that's how I would describe it. It sounds super corny. Exactly. I get it, but like there's like a magic in this scene that you only get with like the Christmas spirit, and it really does nail it, and it does a lot of things so well. So like John Hughes. We talk a lot about how he writes to his audience and to kids and to young people. And I think a big thing that kids look for in movies like this is whenever the kid is on like a level playing field with the adults, when they talk to him like an adult, or they talk down to him like he's a kid, but then they get their comeuppance for doing so. And this scene, it's just dialogue between like a grown man and a kid, but it feels very level, and he's like not talking down to him. But at the same time, there's this layer where you watch it as an adult and you pick up on things where like he has this envelope full of money and he's like, wow, where'd you get all that money? And Kevin's like, oh, I have a lot of grandmothers. And Duncan says, oh, well, that explains it. Well, it doesn't. And he knows that's not the truth, but he's like, I'm not gonna press this kid if something's going on, and that's not what's important right now. And
he basically acts like the hotel staff should have acted, which is that, okay, something is clearly going on here. And to be fair, the hotel staff get dressed down by the family very much for not acting like this. But like you said, he treats it like, as far as Kevin is concerned, he's having an actual conversation with somebody. But like you said, you watch it as an adult, and you just see that there's a concern that Mr. Duncan has, but at the same time, he's like, all right, I'm not going to get super involved, but I'm going to try to give this kid some advice going forward. But I really liked it. And it's also something where this may sound a little backhanded, but he doesn't really fit in directly with like any analogs to the first movie. So he's kind of a new thing really added to this movie, and I liked that. Where he's a specific character that kind of just serves this specific purpose. Now, to be fair, his toy store is a big part of the secondary plot, where that's the place that Marv and Harry are trying to rob. But also, I assumed their names were the other way. I assumed Joe Pesci was Marv and Daniel Stern was Harry, but it's actually the other way around.
It does feel. I agree with you. I can see it going the other way.
But I just really do love this scene. Like you said, from a kid's perspective, it's an adult treating him with respect and speaking to him on a level playing field. But as an adult, you can see that he's still kind of concerned. And like I said, trying to give him some advice. And I just, like you said, it kind of captures and crystallizes what I try to make Christmas like for myself and for others. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Great pick, Andrew. Really lovely. I agree with what you're saying. Like, there's no analog for this character to the first movie. And again, it might sound a little backhanded, but I mean this as praise for the second one. But the best parts of Home Alone 2 is the stuff that isn't copying the first movie.
Right.
I said something along these lines before we hit record here, but like Home Alone 2 it's Home Alone 1 again. Like they're going out of their way to recreate a lot of beats and the characters and stuff, and whatever your opinion of that is whatever. But it does add some side plots and new stuff, and I think that's where it shines the most. And this is going to lean right into my favorite scene of the movie, which is the hotel staff getting their comeuppance from Kevin.
Yes.
It is so wacky. And if
Yeah.
you're watching this movie with a super critical eye, you might be like, wow, grown people would not react this way to hearing dialogue from a movie played, but you're watching the movie wrong if you're doing so. But the hotel staff has figured out that the credit card he used to make the reservation is a stolen credit card. And they assume, I guess, that this kid actually stole a credit card from someone else and is using, which isn't a crazy accusation, but they're almost taking matters in their own hands, and the concierge and the manager and the bellboy go up to confront him along with the security for the hotel. And so they come into the room. Kevin's in the bedroom, and he plays the dialogue from Angels with Even Filthier Souls. It's my favorite Tim Curry moment of the movie, which is our Mark Strong Award winner. It's
I'm
so
sorry,
silly.
sir. I'm afraid you're mistaken.
Oh my god, the fact that it's get on your knees and tell me you love me, and they drop
They
to
do
your
it.
knees. My favorite Tim Curry delivery is, "I love you." He fits so much into those three words in a way that only Tim Curry can do.
Oh my God.
It's so good. And it's like, tell me like you mean it, and then all of them say it like together. It it's great. I love it. And then when the Tommy gun starts firing, they all jump into the hallway and they're crawling. Which, real quick sidebar, probably not a joke you would make today. Like, there's a madman with a gun in the hotel shooting the place up.
Definitely not.
That doesn't fly anymore in today's climate, but totally works here. But I love Tim Curry crawling away from the gunfire, not using his legs.
No.
He's it's like his legs are paralyzed. They just drag behind them. He's like, get back to your rooms. It's just,
it is so...
Man, 100% committed to this gag. And
Yep.
it's my favorite scene in the movie. It's definitely my funniest, the funniest scene in the movie to me. I love your call out for the most sentimental and Christmas feeling scene of the movie, and I agree with that. But like, this one is peak Tim Curry, and it's making me laugh the most. And I enjoy the hotel plot more than Kevin versus the Bandits
Harry
Part
and Marv
2.
Redux,
Yep.
That's basically, this scene is the end of the hotel plot, basically, because he basically jumps out of the hotel straight into Harry and Marv, and that's like right at the hour mark of the movie, and then the second hour is, I know because I paused it to go get something to eat, and it was 1 hour in exactly when that happened, so we're about right halfway through, and then, like I said, the second half is Harry and Marv again, but I agree, this scene is arguably the most iconic scene of this movie.
It's got the catchphrase.
It's got the catchphrase. Just like I said again, I'm not really joking when I say that I think the Ralph Foodie stuff is like arguably the most iconic parts of these movies, because those are the lines that everybody knows.
The first one does have a scene I think we've actually talked about on the podcast before, where Kevin puts on the aftershave and screams. I mean, that's the iconic movie from the first one. But it makes no sense because the aftershave wouldn't burn, because it only burns if you shave yourself and you have cuts, and that's why it burns. So is he reenacting what he saw his dad do, or does it burn him for some reason because he did shave and cut himself? We don't see that. I'm a bit confused by that scene, as you can tell. But anyway, I think that is the scene from the first one. So I got to shut that one out. But yeah.
You want to hear a fun story about the first one real quick?
Of course, Andrew.
So, my friend, I don't know why I thought of this, but I had a friend that used to work for SAG, the Screen Actors. And they would have guild meetings, every month, where actors could come in for whatever reason. And my friend mentioned that somebody would come in for all of those meetings that was in Home Alone. She was trying to get me to guess who it was. And for some reason, I immediately suggested it was the pizza delivery guy. And it was. So apparently the guy in the first Home Alone who delivered the pizzas came to in the city of Chicago SAG-AFTRA meetings. But he apparently would wear these like very loud suits. They would be like purple or orange or things like that. And he would always have things to say at all of the meetings. Like, he would ask for clarifications and asking questions, and the whole time she's telling me this story, I'm just like, he knows who he is, right? Like, he knows that he's the pizza delivery man from Home Alone, right? Like,
No. I gotta imagine he knows who he is. He's in the highest grossing movie of 1990. I want to see him like he's asking a question, someone cuts him off, and he goes, "Do you know who the fuck I am? I'm the pizza man from Home Alone. God damn it!" Like that's his whole identity.
it basically is, though. That story.
If you're out there and you want to come on our show, we would love to have you as a guest.
I should have asked. But yeah, I just love that notion that he's just out there going to SAG meetings, being like, "Just living the dream, man. Just living the dream."
Oh man, we're talking around it, but the movie ends with Kevin versus Harry and Marv Part 2. And I don't think it's either of our favorite parts of the movie. I don't think it's bad by any means. It's kind of what the movie had to deliver on. If you're going to bring Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern back, you've got to get to that point, and that's fine. But what I do like, I like a lot of the Harry and Marv scenes before they cross paths with Kevin again. You see them in New York formulating their plan, and I think all of these scenes are pretty funny. Again, like I mentioned, I love their dynamic together. I love the very first scene where they've escaped prison and apparently hung out like in a fish delivery truck, and they poke their heads out above all these like fish and boxes, and Harry is like, "It's Harry, right? You got me questioning myself now. Joe Pesci is Harry?"
Yes.
He's like, "You smell that?" And Marv is like, "Yeah, fish." It's like, no, it's opportunity. It's making metaphorical, but the real deadpan, yeah, fish is very funny. I like the Sticky Bandits gag. I like that literally in every one of these scenes, Daniel Stern just swipes random things from people passing by, and they never notice the hat or scarf or mittens that he steals.
Yeah.
Fun little visual gag throughout. And I like those scenes. The Harry and Marv without Kevin, still very funny.
Yeah, the chemistry that Daniel Stern and Joe Pesci had is it's undeniable. Like, I can definitely see why they were like, we have to bring them back because, and the question, it's a weird question because, like, in my head, I'm like, yeah, but if they weren't here, because it's interesting because I don't know if you could carry the whole movie off of just the hotel plot. And so it's an interesting dichotomy of like, yeah, it kind of goes back into a redux with Harry and Marv versus Kevin, but like, what could you have done instead? Like, obviously, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want to do. But while it may not necessarily be my favorite part of the movie, I guess it could have been so much worse. That sounds super.
Yeah, I guess the alternative is like Kevin sets up. He booby traps the hotel room for the hotel staff, but that oddly would feel more forced than bringing these two back and doing it in a house. So like it's
right, and then like that just runs into so many problems of like, oh, I'm gonna trick the hotel staff and grievously injure them in their own property. Like, it's just a very strange. You're running into some strange situations there, but yeah, you can't deny that those two work really well together. The visual gags that they have are really fun. Marv or Harry still has the M burned onto his hand from the first movie, fun. So we've got some continuity there. But yeah, these guys are fun to watch. I cannot deny that whatsoever. It's just it does kind of fall into that. It hits the same routine at a certain point. They're going through the house, and you're like, these guys are going to get hurt a lot because that's what's going to happen.
Again, Harry has an M burned into his hand. He should be Marv. He's got an M. Come on, it's right there.
It's right there. Mr. Hughes. I know you're no longer with us. But Mr. Columbus, you're out there.
We learn from a newspaper that the Wet Bandits escaped during a prison riot. And I just can't help but wonder, where's that movie? Where is these pair escaping from a prison during a riot? And what I would love, Andrew, unironically, I would love this, and it would never happen, but it's too late to make this movie now, but I wish in between these movies, they made that movie, Harry and Marv escaping during a prison riot, and it was a straight up serious prison escape film, not slapstick at all. And it's Harry and Marv, but they've got to like formulate this plan and cause a riot.
It's just Shawshank Redemption, but Harry and Marv.
They got to like shank someone and cause
like the exact same movie. It's just literally the exact same movie, but just Harry and Marv instead of Tim Robinson.
That would be very funny.
Home Alone 1.5, written by Stephen King.
We talked about how much we love Uncle Frank. One of my favorite Uncle Frank jokes isn't even said by Uncle Frank. It's just about Uncle Frank. And it's whenever they're asking Kevin, you know exactly what this is. Yeah. They're asking Kevin where his tie is. He's like, I can't get it right now. It's in the bathroom. And Uncle Frank is taking a shower. And he says, if I walked in there and saw him naked, I'd grow up never feeling like a real man, whatever that means.
Clearly means Uncle Frank has big feet. That
is
the look on his parents' faces when he tells them that. It's just classic. They're just
like, I guarantee you that went over my head as a kid. I was like,
oh, absolutely.
But the notion of an uncle saying that to someone now, to a little 10-year-old, it's so funny.
Yes.
God, I love Uncle Frank.
I love the shower gag. I love that it gets reused later with Tim Curry. Get out of here, you nosy little pervert, or I'm going to slap you silly. Just like, I love Tim Curry's reaction when he hears it, when he's just like, ugh! And it's like, runs out of the room and trips over.
And he runs into that like end table that's like knee height and falls to the ground. It's like he runs full force into that thing.
He does.
I don't even know if he either committed to it or that was an accident and they left it in. But
yeah,
he's so good at that.
He's so good. Just his reactions, everything. But yeah, Uncle Frank, like I said, he's a character that I genuinely say that, like, if he was used literally even, like, one joke or scene more than he is, it might literally start tipping over the edge, and I'd be like, we're going a little far. But, like, the amount in here is perfect, and, like, the callback with that is great. Yeah, classic stuff. And, but that original joke, even just watching it now, I was like, Jesus. Like, what a thing to say to a child.
I love the crossfade. Probably my last Tim Curry note. I love Tim Curry. I love his role here, but yeah. I love the crossfade from the How the Grinch Stole Christmas cartoon of the Grinch smiling, and it crossfades to Tim Curry because he just found out that the credit card is stolen.
Yeah,
and he's got a big Grinch-like smile. Beautiful. They knew what they had. I wouldn't be surprised if the concierge role was smaller than it ended up being, but like they got Tim Curry and they're like, we got to get the most out of this. And again, we're all the better for it. But
we are.
God, I love that man. Such a good performance. We've talked a little bit about the pigeon lady, which is all she's called. But I understand the parallel to the first one. Because the first one, he had that scary neighbor that he thought was a serial killer. Then he ends up being nice and helping him, and they bond at the end. They wanted to do that character again. If you didn't know that parallel, this character would seem a little odd, I think. There's so much going on in this movie. But
there is.
This
is a long movie. I don't know if we've established that yet. This movie's 2 hours long.
2 hours long.
Is a very long movie, because I do not think the first one is that long.
I think it's 100 minutes, the first one.
The first one is 103 minutes, call credits, so the whole movie's about an hour and a half. This one's about 20 minutes longer. And I'm #PP, you feel it. There's scenes that, you know, because that scene of them up in the kind of, I don't know if it's a church, I don't know if it's just a performing hall where they're listening to the orchestra. It's clearly meant to mimic the church scene in the first one, where Kevin is watching the girl singing and the man comes in and starts talking to them. And they have very similar those conversations have very similar trajectories. It is a very heartfelt scene. I'm not going to say that it's bad, but it's very clearly just living in that same space as the first one. Where she's having a conversation with the kid, and the kid manages to give her some profound advice that makes her reconsider some of the things that she's done. And, but yeah,
again,
it's still
another one of those, like a kid having a conversation with an adult, and he helps the adult. right?
Right,
Even though he talks
exactly.
like a kid and uses metaphors kids would understand, they're on like a level playing field, and the adult
Right.
is listening to him like someone who can actually help them. That's good stuff to see as a kid.
Yeah, and I do like the scene. I do really like Brenda Fricker's performance. I think she, like I said, there's a lot of layers to the character. When she's just first menacing, it's completely, when I was a kid, I'm sure I saw her originally and was like, huh. I had the same reaction as Kevin. I'm sure I just screamed at pigeons. But when she opens up and they start having conversations, it's a very, like I said, it's a very heartfelt performance. Yeah, it's good stuff. That conversation they have above the orchestra is very good. Like I said, it's like I said, it's classic. It's the same type of thing as this conversation with Mr. Duncan, but I still like it a lot.
Again, going back to like the kid fantasy thing, like it's such a cool notion to be like, I could be out in the city and I find like this secret area that has all this cool stuff that no other adults know about, and I can hang out. Like that definitely plays into that too. I honestly, #PP, I have some mixed feelings about this character being a homeless person and the way that they're depicted. Because on it, I feel like there's a little bit of like romanticizing what it's actually like to be a homeless person on the one hand.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that.
On the other hand, I guess I'm glad that not every homeless person is like desperate and depressed and crazy.
Right.
There's that scene where he's like walking through the park at night, and the people that he comes across are like screaming at it. They're all seem to have mental problems and stuff. Like you don't want to only
mental
see that.
problems,
So, like,
or prostitutes or whatever.
Yeah. So it's a little mixed feelings about it, like I said, but it's not not the worst thing.
No, I agree though, because it seems very strange. Because like she describes that she used to have like a husband and a job and a family, and then she kind of just like ran away from it and became homeless. Like it's a very odd. Like there's a big missing piece there of like how do you go from that to that? And
I also feel like there's a bit of like this movie still has like the 80s New York reputation of being the crime capital of the world and murderers and hookers everywhere, and there's all these.
Which is weird, given that the family is from Chicago. So,
hey, you live there. You said it, not me.
Which the world would still have you believe you can't walk across the street.
There's a lot of references.
I'll have you all know that I have walked across the street multiple times, just fine. I dodge all of the bullets.
There's multiple references to like, you can't walk the city alone. It's dangerous at night. And I think that might be what led to like, oh, well, it'll be a homeless person this time around. And yeah, again, I said what I wanted to say about that. Let's talk about the finale of this film, Andrew. We've got to talk about it. If you thought it was convoluted that the wet bandits come back, take a look at how they find their way to be back inside of a house, even though he's in New York City. And it's like, oh, his dad has a brother that lives there, they're in town, they're in Paris, the house is being renovated, and he finds it in the end, and he ends up in a house again. I think I said it earlier. The movie's giving you exactly what you expected, exactly what the audience wants when, the bandits are back. We're in a house again. He sets up all the booby traps. And they repeat a lot of traps in the first one, but new twist on them. It's all just slapstick, a good solid 15, 20 minutes of delivering the hits. Yeah, very Looney Tunes. And, man, this time around, almost every single booby trap is fatal. Every one of these would kill a man.
Every single one.
It starts with throwing bricks onto his head from 3 stories up and only goes up from there. The one that definitely stood out the most as a kid is whenever Marv gets electrocuted to the point where you see his skull. It's one of those. It's again, that's like Looney Tunes logic. Like nothing about that makes sense, but visually it has something to say. And I don't know. To my knowledge, these movies never came under fire for like promoting violence, and I wouldn't. That's a good thing. I think the fact that it is so slapstick and so Looney Tunes makes this all funny instead of terrifying. Like when when the toolbox crushes both of them against the wall and their noses are literally crooked.
Yeah.
And Marv talks out of the side of his mouth like it was a toolbox going down the stairs.
Yeah. Like it's clearly meant to be funny as far as I'm concerned at that point.
Sure.
Like it's like you watch there's a band called Twisted Sister. You may or may not be familiar. They had a video for their song "We're Not Gonna Take It" that starred the band, but it also had the guy who played Niedermeyer in Animal House. And that same sort of stuff has happened to him throughout that video. And that video was 6 years before Home Alone, folks. So, just saying. But
do with that information what you will.
Well, draw your own conclusions. But it's the same kind of thing where he's going through these things that in any other scenario would be like if you weren't doing it in a music video for a hair metal song or any of that, you'd be like, oh wow, this guy's getting beat up. But because it's this and he's the bad guy, you're just kind of like, yeah, get him. It's not real. You're not, it's so over the top that you're just, any sense of realism is just gone.
My probably second favorite line of the movie, after the one about Uncle Frank being in the shower, comes during this scene. It's whenever Marv walks in the front door finally and falls down to the basement because there's no floor there. And then he looks up and he goes, "Wow, what a hole."
Well, and I love that he leads with, "Harry, I've reached the top," and then just immediately falls down.
Yeah, it's good.
I do like the what's the line? Where they're doing the rope. They're climbing up the rope or down the rope. I forget which one it is. And he's like, "Harry, is that new aftershave?" And he goes, "That's not aftershave. That's kerosene. The rope is soaked in it." And he goes, "Now why would anybody soak a rope in kerosene?" And it lights it on fire. It's like, given everything that's happened to you at this point, guys, did it never occur to you? I do like the jokes they make at the gags, where they do the one where he throws the paint cans again, but they're expecting it because that's a gag he did the first time. Right. So they dodge and they think they've got him, and then he does something else that they weren't expecting, and it catches them. But just those little meta hints, I thought those were fun little ways to kind of cheekily acknowledge that kind of doing the same thing but adding a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect description of this entire movie. It's kind of the same thing, but we're adding a little bit more. I think that's it, Andrew. I ultimately, man, 35% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's pretty harsh. I guess I get it from a critical eye point of view, but I still enjoy this movie. I still like this movie. Whenever it comes time to watching holiday movies, if we're going to watch the first one, we're probably going to put on the second one as well at some point. And I think it's totally cool. Probably, as a kid, I probably liked this one more if I had to think about it. Because Kevin out in the city by himself, living the dream, all the hotel stuff, the more over-the-top gags in the house at the end. I mean, that was probably more exciting for me as a kid. I think this movie's biggest problem from a critical standpoint is simply that it's a sequel to the first one. Because we haven't really talked about the first Home Alone, you and I, too much, but that script is so good. It's so tight. If you want to study setup and payoff script writing, you could do a lot worse than studying the script to Home Alone. The entire movie is building up to the booby trap scene at the end, and every single thing gets set up organically. You come across the spider organically, and the BB gun, and shooting the army men, and the slippery spot outside the house, and knocking the statue over. Everything is set up and gets paid off at the end of the movie, which is how you make a satisfying script: set up and pay off. The first movie is a masterclass at it.
So I do want to shout out one thing about that script.
Oh, yes.
Chris Columbus did an uncredited rewrite of that script that added the elderly neighbor character because he wanted to create a more emotionally impactful ending and give the story a little bit of a serious tone. So that whole character subplot was added by Chris Columbus after he signed on to direct.
It's a good addition. It is. Chris Columbus. Good addition.
Turns out he's kind of good at this.
The second movie by comparison, and I really noticed this watching it, is like we're not introduced to the house until the very end, and all the traps are set up during like a 5-minute montage, and so it gets set up only to be paid off like 10 minutes later, which diminishes the satisfaction a lot, being that it's just set up and then you're seeing it pay off. But again, we kind of talked about it, like the movie has to get to that point. If you're bringing back this cast, you've got to do that, and that's fine. And on its own, in a vacuum, not comparing it to the first one, you still got a very fun, family-friendly Christmas movie. You've got the Christmas magic that you highlighted in your favorite scene, and yeah, I have a good time watching it. I watch it every year.
I do also want to shout out the score by my possible uncle John Williams, and I didn't realize how much that like. There is a lot of music in this movie. There are a lot of Christmas songs, obviously, but it does have other things that it adds to it and stuff that I didn't realize he created, like Christmas Star is the theme for this movie, although it does use the one from the last movie. But yeah, John Williams, also pretty good at the thing that he does.
Andrew, I said it at the top of the episode. I'm going to say it again now. I am excited for this month of movies. We've got a lot more holiday films coming up. We've got a very special guest that I am excited about that you will all hear later on this month. There's a little tease for you. But man, I love Christmas. I love the season. I love these movies. I'm excited to talk about more. How about you, Andrew?
I am. I love Christmas. I was feeling a little bit of a holiday blues there for a little bit, but I'm hoping that as December gets underway, that shifts a little bit, because I love Christmas. I can't deny it. It's always been, I'm sure I've described this before, but Christmas has always been the big holiday in my family. Even when I was a kid, that was the one that my dad and my mom always went all out for. Your birthday was always an occasion. There was always like an Easter dinner. There was always a Thanksgiving dinner, but like Christmas was the thing. Like, decorations, the house, everything. It was a top to bottom, big freaking deal. And so that's my brain just has always treated Christmas the same way. It's the big one. And I mean, it is in pretty much every single metric by modern society standards. But I love it, and I can't deny it. So I'm excited to jump into some of these, some of which I'm a huge fan of. So I'm looking forward to it.
For now, it's time for our question of the week, which I think is a very appropriate question to kick off this month. This question comes from the Question of the Week channel in our Discord server. If you're not there already, what are you waiting for? There's a link in the show notes. Come join us. Ask us more questions for future episodes. But this question comes from the Dean, who says, I just remembered that Hook could be considered a Christmas movie. What are among your top favorite non-traditional Christmas movies? Great question, the Dean. We've talked a bit about this before, because I'm very fine with being loosey-goosey on what you consider Christmas movies. You know, Die Hard's the classic one people like to talk about. But yeah, if Christmas is in the background, if it's during that time of year, if it's mentioned, if there's any slight correlation to Christmas or even just the season, heck yeah, it's a Christmas movie. Go ahead and watch it. But of those movies, Andrew, which ones are making your regular annual watch list? The first one that comes to mind for me, and I mean, this is probably a pretty straight up Christmas movie, but still the first one that comes to mind for me is Edward Scissorhands, which it takes place at Christmas, no doubt, but right. Like the movie isn't about the spirit of Christmas like you think of like traditional Christmas stories. I think it's a little bit of a non-traditional one, but I like to watch that every year during Christmas time. I've got the soundtrack on vinyl that I add to my rotation during the month of December. Good stuff. Definitely watch that one every year.
I mean, there's the big one that I feel like we'll have to talk about eventually, but I guess we'll save that for later in the conversation. For me, there's a few.
Go ahead. We can't just tease that.
Obviously, it's Die Hard. That's the big.
Did you not hear me that I mentioned that already, Andrew?
Yeah, whatever. But he didn't talk about it very much. But that's the big. You hear. I'm pretty sure I said on the show. I don't care.
It's a boring debate. Move on.
It's a boring debate. Watch it or don't. It's fine. I just wanted an excuse to bring that up again. Look, if watching Die Hard brings you joy, watch it. That's all there is to it.
I personally don't make it a point to watch it every year, but yeah, if you do, that's cool.
It's that thing where like I'll put it on like while I'm doing something. Like it's like Die Hard's on in the back. I can walk right in and see Bruce Willis getting his feet cut up by glass. Christmas. But another one I hear about a lot is Gremlins. Another one that's kind of set at Christmas, but not about Christmas. Anything by Shane Black, really. Like you mentioned Die Hard, but like Lethal Weapon has, context that sets it at Christmas. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Yeah,
Iron Man 3.
That's the first one I think of, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, yeah.
Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Iron Man 3, Long Kiss Goodnight. They all kind of have scenes at Christmas. Even The Nice Guys. The last scene of The Nice Guys, they go into a bar that's Christmas decorations up. Like, it's any Shane Black movie has arguments to make it kind of a Christmas movie. So I do throw a lot of those into the rotation sometimes.
I love his statement on that. He's talked about it, and he's like, why do you set so many of your movies at Christmas? And he's like, it looks cool. You got all the lights in the background and stuff. Like it's a good time to set a movie, and that's it.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's all you need.
I completely agree. You don't need it to be deeper than that. In Bruges is another one that like it's set at Christmas in a Christmas town, but the plot itself is not really about Christmas. I do love In Bruges. I watch In Bruges
Such
pretty
a good
much
movie.
Every season. Batman Returns for a lot of people fits into that tone. I really reconnected with that movie in a big way after we did it for the show, because like I watched it, but like when I watched it for the show, and I was like, man, this movie kind of rules.
It was not part of my Christmas rotation before we made that recording last year, but I'm gonna watch it again this year. I think it's definitely part of it now. I agree. I found like a new love for that movie, and I'm not trying to get a spicy take here. I most days I would rather watch Batman Returns than Batman 89. I'm not gonna go as far as say it's a better movie. Like I'm not ranking the movies, but it is so damn entertaining.
It is very entertaining. Trading Places, Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy has sequences that take place over Christmas. I could see people making an argument for that one. Yeah, those are the ones that I kind of look at. There's weird ones you can like Brazil. Technically, takes place over Christmas, but 70% of Brazil you're not sure as if it's really happening. So I don't. Folks, Brazil's a weird movie. I would not recommend watching it as a holiday season. Brazil's weird.
The Dean mentions Hook specifically, which is a movie I watched all the time growing up. I had never thought of that as Christmas movie.
I hadn't either.
But yeah, like in the real world segments, I guess. I know for sure it's snowing. I can picture that, but I guess it's set during Christmas time, and sure.
I guess so. Yeah, I have not gone back to Hook in some time. Some might say it's a good candidate for the show, but you got to wonder if that's going to come back later, folks. But yeah, I've never really thought about that one. That one's I again, just to be fair, I have not gone back to Hook in a long time, but I think it does technically fit that pantheon of it is taking place over the course of like Eyes Wide Shut. Technically the same barometer.
Watch it with the whole family.
Yeah, can't go wrong with Eyes Wide Shut being a family show.
Get the family together, sit by the fire, drink some cocoa, watch Eyes Wide Shut. It's a good time.
Watch Eyes Wide Shut and watch the last film of Stanley Kubrick's career.
Gremlins is a good shout out. I have called Gremlins my favorite Christmas movie before. I haven't watched it in a minute. I'm not sure if that holds up, but it's basically Gremlins and the first Home Alone, the first ones that come to mind for my personal favorite. So yeah, Gremlins is a great shout out for a non-traditional Christmas movie.
I think so. It's probably one of my favorites that fits into that that kind of genre that we're looking at here. There's a couple that's like I've seen people say that Black Christmas isn't a traditional Christmas movie, and it's got Christmas in the title. Like from the title that it takes place at Christmas at the bare minimum. So like yes, it is not a Christmas movie, quote unquote, but when the movie is set is pretty evident from the title. And so yeah, you get movies that have Christmas in the title that aren't directly about it, but you know what's happening there. You know what's going on. But Gremlins, I think, is the one that nobody talks about, not nearly as much as Die Hard. So I think it's probably my quick go-to. In Bruges is probably the one that I most personally enjoy, just because I watch it a lot. To the point that like I would like to go to Bruges around Christmas time one year just to see it, and to also just be like, it's a fairy tale freaking town.
Is that your favorite Colin Farrell performance?
Maybe. It's probably my favorite Brendan Gleeson performance. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I really like his character in that movie. Like he's like there are these hitmen, and so there's like this just moral hole in them, but there's this weird paternal role that Brendan Gleeson takes towards Colin Farrell, and Colin Farrell like perfectly plays like the rebellious teenager who hates everything that he's having to do, and just Brendan Gleeson kind of sits in that paternal role so well, and just what ultimately happens with his character and the way he ultimately kind of the fate he meets just again kind of establishes how much he actually cared about Colin Farrell's character. I like that all a lot.
And who remind me, who else is in that movie, Andrew? Who's the antagonist?
There's a gentleman in that movie by the name of Rafe Fiennes. He's got some of the best lines in that movie, though. I can't even deny it. His outbursts are just tremendous. But yes, In Bruges, folks. Again, not for the whole family. Not In Bruges is not, but yeah, definitely probably my favorite.
I agree. Great movie. And how about you? What are your favorite non-traditional holiday or Christmas films? What do you like to watch this time of year that might be surprising to some people? We want to hear about it. Let us know. Hit us up on Discord. Hit us up on social media. Whatever's most convenient for you. We are going to read it. And until next time, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for a SoundCloud link. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.